I'm talking with Vint Cerf, sometimes known as the father of the internet, wrote the protocols that enable computers to communicate with each other. Everybody is on the internet these days. What do you think is the most important impact that the internet has had in the last 50 years?
Okay, well, that's a tough problem to answer. First of all, I'm not the only inventor of the internet. Bob Kahn and I started the work, and now tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have contributed to it. And it's important to understand that it was possible for people to contribute to it. It was designed in such a way that people could extend the protocol hierarchy, they could add new protocols horizontally. It still is one of the more flexible architectures for adding new ideas ever. So it's scaled up by a factor of 1 billion in many different directions. So it's a very important important contribution has been its flexibility and expandability. That's one point. Second point is that the system has allowed for an enormous number of different ways in which people could interact, could share information, could process the information, could discover each other, people with common interests. This ability to be accessible to virtually everyone. Now, not everyone on the planet has access. We think about 2.9 billion people still don't. And some of them may not want to, given the headlines that they see with possible hazards on the network, whether it's malware or ransomware or phishing or other kinds of problems, misinformation.
Is it possible to be totally off the internet these days? Can a person really survive without the internet?
I think it would be hard, although I imagine there are people who could avoid using the internet, but they can't avoid the fact that other people use it and they're relying on it, and their reliance may have an impact on you, even if you're not a user of the internet services. And certainly an awful lot of people in the world have mobiles. Mobiles have applications. The applications actually run in the internet. And so there's over-dependence, in my opinion, on the mobile technology. There's literally millions of applications. And if the mobile isn't working for some reason, it's amazing how much damage that does to your day. If you can't get logged in with two-factor authentication to your bank account, you can't get the email that might have been the thing that saved your business. There's so many different things like that, that having dependence on a single device is not a good thing. We need to find a way to proliferate this and make it more resilient.
Is there a chance that the whole internet could go down through some kind of solar flare or something?
Well, certainly if you wiped out the ability to produce electricity, the internet would eventually go down because the batteries would run out, and the internet doesn't work without electricity. So that's in the extreme scenario. In terms of software bugs and malware and things like that, there's also some risk associated with that. Some of the more notable failures in the internet have been the result of misconfiguration. This is by accident as opposed to a deliberate attack. There are also cases where internet's been interfered with by a deliberate attack, like denial of service attacks, where somebody transmits huge amounts of data to one website or one target host, and the host falls over because it can't manage all that traffic. So, but I don't think the internet has ever, since it was turned on in 1983, ever totally gone down. Of course, now that I've said that, probably something terrible will happen. But it's been a fairly resilient structure.
Now, what about the impact of artificial intelligence on the internet? Because AI is permeating everything. Does it make the internet a much more powerful tool? And can that tool be used for harm just as easily as it can be used for good?
Look, the internet is a tool for connecting people to each other and people to computing capabilities. And AI is just another computing capability to first order. It consumes a substantial amount of computer power to run, for example, a large language model or a machine learning model. It hasn't had a direct effect on the internet's design and operation, but it has an impact on people who are trying to use these technologies for some application.
What do you see in the next 50 years for the internet? It'll probably be faster, more efficient, quantitatively better. Do you see any major qualitative differences, any new dimensions?
Well, several things have happened. The internet has expanded by a factor of about 10 million since we first turned it on in almost every dimension. Number of posts, number of people, the data rates that we operate at. We were at 50 kilobits a second in the backbone in 1969. And today it's not uncommon to have a 400 to 800 gigabit per second channel per optical channel on the network. So the numbers are huge. I would say that what we can anticipate going forward is several things. First, more and varied access to the internet. So low Earth orbiting satellites have added a whole new dimension of access, especially when you're out in the ocean or in remote parts of the world where pulling a fiber or trying to use a radio link, terrestrial radio link doesn't work very well. So we're seeing significant improvement in access to the network. The other thing that we're starting to see is the beginning of an interplanetary dimension to the internet. Some new protocols have been developed over the past 25 years in order to overcome the long delays associated with interplanetary communication and the disruption that's caused by planetary rotation or orbital dynamics. So over the next 50 years, we can anticipate the expansion of an internet communication system for manned and robotic space exploration and commercialization. Today, NASA and ESA and JAXA and CARI, the various space agencies, are already envisioning commercial operations on the moon and perhaps later in the rest of the solar system.
So if you're on Earth and you want to send an email message to Mars, for example, it's going to take time.
It'll take time. It could be as much as 20 minutes. But on the other hand, email is fortunately a delay-tolerant kind of application. On the other hand, if you're trying to have a conversation, it ain't going to work because it takes 20 minutes for your voice to get there and another 20 minutes to hear the response coming back. That's a 40-minute round-trip time.
Now, some people say that the internet, through its method of forging connections, will tend to ultimately bring the world together. Some people think it might bring the world apart. Do you have a view on that?
I think that rather than blaming the technology and saying it's either disruptive or constructive, the technology is what we decide to do with it. And so people who use the internet to build new companies, provide new applications, to gather health data and improve our ability to diagnose and treat disease, those are all very constructive uses of the net. But at the same time, we're starting to see the proliferation and amplification of misinformation and disinformation. We hear about fake videos and fake imagery and fake news and all these other things. And artificial intelligence is actually helping people produce that sort of thing. But on the bottom of all of this, it's what people choose to do with the tool that counts. So what we hope for is that the society, our collective societies, will recognize the importance of kind and thoughtful uses of these technologies for constructive purposes. We may need to do some international agreements in order to hold parties accountable who abuse their privilege of using the internet.
Now, some people say that the internet needs to be controlled to make sure that too much bad stuff doesn't get on it. Do you think that's going down the wrong road, or is this a trade-off?
It's going down the wrong road. It's not the internet that needs to be controlled. It's people that need to be controlled. They need to be given incentives for better behavior. They need to be given incentives and held responsible and held accountable for harmful behavior. But that is a social dynamic. That's not a technical.
Does the technology provide any insight into human behavior? For example, some people say that in developing artificial intelligence, that gives us greater insight into how natural intelligence works. If we can debug a computer system, maybe we could debug a brain.
No, I think that I would not buy that argument. The brain is infinitely more complex than anything we have ever built. There have been some recent reports about how complex the neural systems are, where there are tens of thousands of synapse interconnections, even on a single axon.
But is it a few basic configurations just repeated many, many times?
It's more than that. I think that we're seeing enormous variations in the way in which nerves interact with each other. People talk about the number of neurons in the brain. That's not the important part. The important part is the number of interconnections and among all of those neurons that gives the brain its remarkable capability. So I really don't think that we're going to learn a whole lot about the human brain by studying the internet or trying to fix the internet. What we really need to do is to help people learn how to use internet-like technologies. Doug Engelbart was right when he talked about augmenting human intelligence with computer-based tools. Those tools amplify our capacity to do various things. Some of the tools allow a machine to correctly translate hundreds of languages into each other, which is something no human being can do. What about ingesting the entire World Wide Web and then helping people find content that's relevant in it? That's what search engines do. Those are things that no human being would ever do on their own.
But even if people had all this vast information at their fingertips, would you assume that they would then have an incentive to use it for beneficial purposes?
Well, some people have incentive to do exactly that, and other people have incentives to do something else.
Looking forward to the next 50 years, are you very optimistic that the internet will be a great boon for the world, or maybe it'll create problems?
I think that the internet is going to be a huge benefit in the long term. We have to learn more about how to manage its use. We have to provide incentives for people to abide by better behavior and be thoughtful about what they do with those technologies. But the fact that we can amplify the use of computer resources in order to do beneficial things will win out in the long run.
One amazing thing about the internet is that one person, no matter where they are, could instantly reach an audience consisting of the entire world.
Well, this is something new. It used to be that for mass media, there were a few small number of owners of the capacity to broadcast, whether it was radio or television or print publication and so on. Today, any person who's online on the internet potentially has the ability to convey ideas to the whole population that's on the internet. So that's new, and we have to learn how to use that capacity wisely.
Would you say that the internet accelerates history? Things move at a much faster pace because of the rapid exchange of knowledge.
A lot of people think that. If you go back to 1895 and you ask what is in the near future, first of all, that's when Becquerel discovered radioactivity in 1895. In just 6 years later, Marconi demonstrated that you didn't need transatlantic cables to transmit telegraphy. You could do it through the air with radio. In 1903, just a few more years after that, we got heavier than air aircraft to fly, and everybody else said that's impossible. And then we get into the early 1900s, we have the automobile showing up that goes faster than horses do. And then, it just keeps going. There are these massive transformations. If you get all the way up to the mid-1950s, we've got atomic bombs and nuclear power, and we've got radio and television. We've got the beginnings of networking. We have the transistor that was invented. All the people who lived through that period probably felt the same way then as people do today about the pace of technology, feeling as if it's just running ahead of you.
So what can we do to make the internet better?
Well, one thing you can do is to develop protocols that use the resources better. An example of this is something called QUIC, which was developed at Google to make a more efficient way of opening and closing secured connections. We need to have better authentication. We need to provide provenance of information that's out on the network so that when we start using it, even when the artificial intelligence machines are ingesting it, there's some indication of the quality and value of the information that we use to train these models. The consumers of large language model applications need to have some reason to trust the information that's produced by generative AI. We haven't done that work yet. We really need to work on that so that people can base their choices and decisions on strongly authenticated content as opposed to content of uncertain origin.
What do you think about Al Gore?
Al Gore deserves a lot of credit for helping to make the internet what it is today. In 1986, as a senator, he called a hearing together that my partner Bob Kahn went to and introduced the term National Information Infrastructure. At the end of that hearing, Al asked whether it was appropriate to design and build a fiber optic network to connect the universities in the United States to the 5 supercomputer centers that the National Science Foundation and DOE were funding. The next thing you know, a bunch of us go up to San Diego the next year, early 87, and come back with the National Research and Education Network program. So then, around 1992, Al Gore gets elected vice president along with President Clinton. And he helps to get legislation done to make it allowed that there is commercial traffic going on the government-sponsored backbones that made up the then internet in the United States. And that legislation made it possible for us to commercialize internet service. And that's one of the reasons I give him a lot of credit for helping the internet become what it is today.